Hi, and welcome to another episode of Ham 101. Today we're going to talk about kind of a fun subject, and that is doing your research online. The internet can be a wonderful thing, it can be a horrible thing, it can be a lot of different things to a lot of people. There is a lot of information out there, but I'm going to help you today try to sort through a little bit of that so that it makes a little more sense to you. First of all, a couple concepts or a couple things to think about. One, I'm going to suggest some sites to you that provide a fairly broad range of interesting information and useful information that is specific to ham radio. First of those is eham.net, and I'll provide links down below in the description. eham.net, qrz.com, and radioreference.com. Now those are all three sites that are populated and frequented by very technical people, and there is a wealth of information that's already there, and it's also a place where you can go onto the forums and ask questions about specific things. And we'll talk a little bit about how you might do that and some cautions about that a little later in the episode. So the other thing to think about when you're looking on the internet for information is that the reviews and the information that you will find on the internet related to ham radio has an extra element or an extra dimension to it that you won't find when it comes to reviews for things like movies or cars or something like that. Hams have a particular way about them in terms of that they are always looking to optimize things. And I call this whole kind of discussion the functional continuum. There's a difference between things that will work and things that are better. And hams are always striving to optimize equipment and systems and antennas and you name it, anything related to ham radio. Hams are generally they're experimenting. They like to experiment, they like to try different things, and they like to pass that information on to you to save you from that trouble, even though that might be what you're after is some of the experimentation. But they're always looking for something better. They're always they start out at, this either works or it doesn't work. But then once you kind of get past that threshold of does it work, then you go up in the continuum, and there will always be people who will say negative things about a particular solution because it's not optimum, because it's not the best it could be, because it's not optimum, because it can always be improved. And so don't get discouraged by that. Don't misinterpret that as an answer that says no, what you're trying to do won't work. It's just that they're always going to look for a better way. And so no matter what you say, somebody else is going to come back and say, oh, but there's a better way to do that. And you can chase your tail forever, especially for a new ham that's not familiar with the technology and things like that. This stuff can quickly get over your head. It can quickly get to be discouraging, and you'll wonder, if there's ever any end to it. And of course, the answer to that is no. There is no end to it, and that's just part of the ham hobby. So as you look on those sites, keep that in mind. That maybe somebody's saying something negative about a piece of equipment or a solution or a system or something like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It's just that in that person's eyes, it's not the optimum solution, and he or she may have a better way of doing it that he's suggesting. That is worth consideration. But if you're just trying to get on the air, and if you're just trying to find something that works, if you're just looking for reviews on a radio or reviews on an antenna or a question about how to mount something in your car or something like that, you don't need to know what the optimum answer is. You need to know what'll work. And so you kind of have to filter through the stuff that you see online to find that, because sometimes it's a little hard to find. So the other issue that I would talk about with regard to reviews is it's kind of like the ice skating judging, in that they come up with, they've got 12 judges or whatever. I'm not that familiar with ice skating, but I remember the concept that they've got multiple judges and they always throw out the top and the bottom scores. And that kind of compacts the reality of it a little bit. Same is true for reviews, and this is true of not just ham stuff, but other stuff too. If you see a lot of very effusive, very positive reviews that are short on details, those probably aren't real. Those are people that have a vested interest in reviewing that product and making it sound better than it really is. So kind of discount those. On the other hand, and this is particular to the ham radio world, if you see something that is particularly negative and kind of a rant, if you will. Very often that is not something that happened with the equipment or not a fault of the equipment, especially if there's a lot of other reviews that are very positive about this piece of equipment. But it's very often a user problem. Somebody couldn't figure out how to use it correctly, or they used it incorrectly and it broke, or something like that. So you can kind of discount those and look for the ones that are in the middle. Look for the ones that have a lot of detail. Look for the reviews where they talk about how they've used this particular piece of equipment or how they've constructed this system and things like that, and look for the details, because then you know you've got people that have actually used the equipment or the item that you're talking about, and they're more likely to be an honest review. And then again, kind of look at it on balance. You will find, like on eham.net, there's a lot of equipment reviews. And for any piece of equipment that's been around for any time at all, there will be dozens, if not hundreds, of reviews. And if you kind of get a sense for the kind of the community consensus around those reviews, that'll give you a pretty good accurate idea of that particular piece of equipment or item that you're looking at. But you'll always find some that are just ridiculously positive and effusive and just, can't say enough good things. And you'll find some that are very negative and very difficult. And those are usually, like I said, those are usually issues with the user himself, not the equipment. So just be aware of that. The second thing that I would suggest to you is that there's really two ways of getting information off the internet. One is you can go look at information that's already there and try to answer your question that way, or to gain information that way. And the forums that I mentioned are a good place to do that. There are also a number of like Yahoo groups, Google groups, Groups.io, some of these online groups that are specific to an item, a piece of equipment, a piece of software, things like that. If you're going to go out, if you're thinking about buying a particular radio, for instance, and you want to find out more about it and its history and things like that, if you go to groups.yahoo.com and search for that piece of equipment, you will probably find there's at least one Yahoo group, or you could do the same thing with Google Groups, and Groups.io is becoming more popular as time goes on. But you can find at least one or two groups that there may be hundreds of hams that have joined that group, that have shared their experience and answered each other's question. And generally joining those groups is a very easy thing to do. You just submit information to the moderator and they immediately will approve you, and then you can start looking at the history of the messages on that. And for equipment that's been around for a while, there may be years of history and there may be thousands of messages in there. And you can search that for specific issues that you may be having, or that you have specific questions that you may want to answer and things like that. So again, utilize those, but keep that filter in mind. Throw out the really positive stuff, throw out the really negative stuff, and kind of look for a sense of the community. That is, those groups are really, really handy for finding information. They're also good for asking information. One thing I would caution you, though, is when you think you want to ask one of these groups a question, or if you want to post a question on one of the forums, just be ready, because you're going to get a lot of answers, and not all of them are going to be edifying. Not all of them are going to be positive. They don't really know anything about you. They don't know you're a new ham. They're not necessarily going to be gentle with you and be courteous. And there's a lot of people out there that frequent these forums that are very opinionated, and their opinion may or may not be right. So you're going to have to discount a lot of the stuff that you get in response to that. But some of it's going to be very negative. Some of it's going to be, very derogatory. And you just have to be prepared for that, and just kind of let that stuff go. Just don't get wrapped around the axle on that, because you will get good information if you post a question. The one thing that I would suggest, though, is if you post a question to one of these things, to one of these forums, don't scattergun it. Pick a forum that you think would be most applicable and just post the question once. When you post 3 or 4 times, a lot of people read these same forums and they'll figure it out real quick that you've kind of shotgunned this question, and that may be a quick way to get a lot of answers, but it's also a quick way to get a lot of negative feedback about you. And so ask your question with a certain amount of detail. It's one of my favorite things when I'm looking at these forums is somebody will post a question. It's like, what's your favorite, or what's the best 2-meter 440 antenna? Well, criminy, there's an infinite number of answers to that, none of which will really answer your question. But if you say, hey, here's my situation, I'm going to mount this on a 20-foot post on my deck, and I need something that the neighbors won't notice because I'm in a homeowners association. What's a good antenna that doesn't, isn't real big and won't stand out, and that I can kind of hide in amongst my house and things like that. If you give them a lot of specific information, you'll get a lot better answer. You'll get a lot more valuable information back from the interweb, from all the people that are out there. But again, recognize that not all that's going to be good information, and you're going to have to weed through it. The reality is, and we talk about this in some of the earlier episodes, the reality is that, if you join a club, as like we recommend in one of the earlier episodes, that's going to be your best source of information. If you've got questions about things, there are going to be people there that are willing to help you, and the ability to do a face-to-face conversation and talk through some of these issues is going to get you to where you need to go a whole lot faster and a whole lot easier and with a lot less pain and stress than trying to do it on the internet. So there's a lot of information on the internet. There's no question about that. There's a lot of good information on the internet. There's also a lot of bad information on the internet. So just be smart about it and use it as it is intended, and don't rely on stuff like that too much. And don't forget that there are a lot of other people out there in your club or in other organizations around your area that are willing to help you. And they will be a better source for you in the long run and help you build relationships with other hams than running around the internet. It's pretty easy to run around the internet and find things, but it can be really frustrating, and it can lead you down a bad path or a wrong path in the end. So have fun with that, and good luck on the internet, and hope that you get your questions answered. So until next time, this is Herb NZ0F 73.